Welcome back. You're still tuned in to Salam Media, your home of humanitarian journalism with myself, Salailo Makwidira. The time is almost 20 minutes before 10, and this hour of news and views is proudly sponsored by Africa Muslims Agency. Africa Muslims Agency, a beacon of hope to communities for over 35 years in Africa and beyond. And with that being said, we'll be delving into a very, very important topic in a bit. In over decades ago, the U.S. began detaining men at Guantanamo Bay, marking a dark chapter in global human rights history. This week, the Biden administration transferred 11 Yemeni detainees to Oman, a man who had spent more than 20 years in detention without ever being charged. This move has brought the remaining detainees count to just 15, the lowest since the prison's inception in 2002. However, the legacy of Guantanamo Bay continues to spark intense debate about justice, accountability, and human rights violations. And joining us today is Clive Stafford Smith, a renowned human rights lawyer who brought the very first case against Guantanamo, Rasul versus Bush, to the U.S. Supreme Court back in 2002, a landmark case that challenged the legality of indefinite detention at the facility. Clive, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Salam Media. Really, really appreciate you giving us your time.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
I think first and foremost, before we get to the recent transfers, I want to touch a bit on a bit of historical context. Guantanamo was established over 2 decades ago now. From your perspective, how did it become such a contentious symbol of human rights abuses and a legal black hole for detainees, if I can put it that way?
Yeah, well, what we did as Americans is rather typical, and it's not unique to America, I'm afraid. We take a small group of people, in this case, 780, and we lock them up in a secret prison where no one is allowed to go see them. And we say to the world, well, these are the worst of the worst terrorists in the world. These are the people who are the cause of all of our troubles. And that's meant to convince the citizens of America that we're doing something about, the dreadful event of 9/11 back 20, almost 24 years ago now. And when I was in Louisiana at the time, I was doing death penalty work, and this is what we'd done for years with young black men. We had put them on death row and said, we execute 10 of these young black men each year. That'll show that we're doing something against crime, which is obviously ridiculous. And it's just a big lie. And the same was true here. And, that's why I brought the first case against Guantanamo. I had no idea at the time that it would be so wrong. I had no real idea that we were going to have tortured people the way we had. We did claim that everyone was innocent until proven guilty. But honestly, between you and me, I didn't think everyone was innocent. I thought probably a lot of them had been on the battlefield in Afghanistan. I'm not sure that's any of America's business. But then when we finally got in there, I had a terrible time. I've represented 87 of the prisoners in Guantanamo to date. That's, more than 10% of the whole lot. And I have yet to represent someone who was genuinely involved in any nefarious thing. No one who had anything to do with 9/11. And, the reason for that was that we as Americans were paying huge sums of money as bounties to get President Musharraf then in Pakistan and his people to turn people in. And then we would torture them until they said they were terrorists. And, that's how it all worked. And it's just a shocking example of injustice. And I'm glad, actually the last of my 87 people left this week, and he should have left years ago.
Mm, mm, mm. And when took up that Rasul versus Bush case back in 2002, did you expect it to reach the Supreme Court and ultimately win? Were you that convinced of it?
Well, I certainly knew it would get to the Supreme Court because it was the key case to deal with this issue. We lost in the lower courts in both of those. And, actually, I wasn't terribly confident that the Supreme Court, which is not notable for its liberal approach to human rights, I wasn't confident that they would do the right thing until Abu Ghraib happened. And so we didn't get to the Supreme Court till 2003. 2004. And then in early 2004, all those pictures appeared about Abu Ghraib. And up till that point, I don't think Americans really understood how bad things had got. But when people started seeing, including when the Supreme Court justices saw the pictures of what the US had been doing in Abu Ghraib, that finally, pulled basically the curtains back, and people could see the dreadful things that the Bush administration had got into.
Mm, mm, mm. I want to focus on the recent transfers now. The Biden administration transferring 11 Yemeni men to Oman earlier this week, leaving only 15 detainees. How do you interpret this move, and does it indicate progress when it comes to addressing the injustices at Guantanamo?
Well, I mean, it clearly does. And Biden, at least to his credit, is committed to trying to put all of these terrible excesses of the war on terror behind us. But at the same time, it's been a long time coming, hasn't it? And you would think that here we are in 2025. This is the place opened on January the 11th, 2002. So we're 23 years on. And you would think, wow, by now they really ought to have whittled everyone down to the very worst of the worst. Well, Khalid Qasim, one of my guys, who was released this week, he was just nobody. I mean, I don't mean that in a derogatory way. He was a really delightful guy and a fine painter and artist. But he just had nothing to do with Afghanistan, never been there. And so for 23 years, he was one of the early people to be taken to Guantanamo. And for all those years, he was held without trial. It had a devastating impact on his mental health, as you would expect. I mean, to be held without being charged for anything. So it was just awful. And I'm very pleased he left, but he should have left over a year ago, even under their own rules. And the reason he didn't was because these same 11 people were slated to go to Oman in October 2023. And then what happened in Gaza happened. And it had nothing to do with the people in Guantanamo, but the US government decided not to let them go simply because Hamas had attacked Israel, and it had nothing to do with the people in Guantanamo. So it's that sort of political nonsense that resulted in further injustice for the prisoners there.
I want to take a quick break, but then when we come back, I want to focus a bit on the U.S. judicial and detention system, because it's quite concerning that these men have spent more than 20 years in detention without being charged, and I want to know what does this say about the U.S. judicial and detention system. I know it might come out as a simple question, but what can we deduce from this, particularly in the context of counterterrorism? But I'd like to touch on it a bit after this short break.
Okay.
Salam Media. This is Salam Media, coming to you live from South Africa.
Africa. Shimmer, sparkle, captivate. Nothing less than a masterpiece. Droplets of gold inspires precious design. Platinum bursts with intricate freshness. And every pure diamond becomes more than just a girl's best friend. Voda Gold Gem Jewelers, where timeless dreams become a reality. Come to us. We tailor-make designer gold, platinum, and diamond jewelry. Trade in or remodel your old gold. Clad yourself with classy name-branded watches. We offer insurance valuation and freezer card calculation. Visit us at 534 Ridge Road, Overport, or call 031-208-9142. Voda Gold Gem Jewelers, manufacturers of fine gold and diamond jewelry.
Discover the Africa of your dreams and surround yourself with her spectacular beauty. Relax beneath her serene sunsets and explore wildlife at its natural best. It's where the pride of Africa comes together. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve. Get to know the Big Five or cruise on an elephant safari game drive. Interact with lion and tiger cubs and enjoy world-class halal cuisine while we pamper you during your 5-star stay. Indulge in the true African experience. For reservations, call now on 042 203 1400 or visit kwantu.co.za. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve, the place of gathering.
When the perfect blend of stylish decor, exquisite halal cuisine, and warm hospitality come together, it could only mean Al Bayt Lodge, your true home away from home. Al Bayt is the ideal heaven for families, business people, and tourists with its 4-star family rooms and other luxurious facilities. Conveniently situated close to Port Elizabeth Airport, the beach, and other amenities, your stay will be truly unforgettable, as you'll be taking home lasting memories of the warm hospitality, the serenity and tranquility that Al Bayt has to offer. For reservations, call 041 583 6415 or visit www.albaytlodge.co.za.
Embark on your spiritual journey to Umrah with Mr. Fly Travels. Are you ready to fulfill a lifelong dream and experience the spiritual journey of Umrah? At Mr. Fly Travels, we are dedicated to providing seamless, spiritually enriching trips to the holy cities of Mecca and Medina. Let us handle every detail so you can focus on your connection with Allah. Our Umrah packages include visa processing, luxurious accommodation, private transfers, guided ziyarah tours, and culinary delights. Take the first step on your journey to spiritual rejuvenation. Reserve your Umrah package today. Limited spots available. Our flexibility with dates to accommodate our clients makes us unique. Call Zuberi on 074 044 4300.
Connect and stay ahead with Salam Media. This is Salam Media, coming to you live from South Africa.
Welcome back. You're still tuned in to Salam Media, and we're still unpacking a very, very interesting move by the Biden administration that has transferred 11 Yemeni detainees to Oman from Guantanamo Bay, who had spent more than 20 years in detention without being charged. This move has brought the remaining detainee count to just 15, the lowest since the prison's inception in 2002. And we're unpacking this move with Clive Stafford Smith. He's a renowned human rights lawyer who brought the very first case against Guantanamo to the U.S. Supreme Court in 2002, a landmark case that challenged the legality of indefinite detention at the facility. Clive, thank you so much for staying with us. Before we went on that short break, I wanted to touch briefly on just the U.S. justice and detention system. You have men that are in detention for almost 20 years. There's no, any kind of, charge against them. What does this say? I know it almost feels like a simple question, but what does this say about the U.S. judicial and detention system, particularly when it comes to the context of counterterrorism?
Well, I'm not a massive fan of the way we run prisons in any place. And actually, I should say this. The US system, for all its flaws and their manifest, is fabulous in the sense that I, along with a couple of my friends, was able to sue the most powerful person on the planet, then it was George Bush, and win and get the Supreme Court, which is a conservative group of people, to say these men had rights. And so, that's something that we have in the US, that if you're in Britain, for example, which is where I'm talking to you from right now, you don't have any of that. You people don't even know the name of the British Guantanamo Bay, which is really Belmarsh Prison. where the conditions are just as bad as Guantanamo, but the lawyers in Britain don't have the power to do much about it, or at least they don't create that power. So I think it's important to recognize that actually in the US, we do have the power to do something. But it's not just about indefinite detention without trial. It's about picking on poor people, people who don't have money and can't defend themselves, and treating them in this abysmal way as if they are the root of all evil. I mean, I'm leaving right after we get off this call to head towards the US on the case of Afia Siddiqui. Now, Afia had a trial. It was a manifestly rubbish trial. I mean, she was dragged halfway around the world from Afghanistan to New York, where the conviction rate is 99.5%. So only 1 in 200 people don't get convicted in that court. And the reason that she got an unfair trial was, her lawyers never even were able to go to Afghanistan. There was a war going on at the time, and she was charged with something total nonsense. But the overwhelming power of the state put her in prison for 86 years. So this is a consistent thing between people who have trials and people who don't have trials. The thing that's extraordinary and extreme in Guantanamo is that we were taking this small group of people and blaming them for everything that happened post 9/11. And what we were doing, in fact, was angering. I think I can speak for you probably and say that we were angering you as a Muslim person in the world because we were being such hypocrites. And so far from making the world safer, a place like Guantanamo Bay, where we basically throw out any pretense of justice, just pisses the world off and creates more enemies for the US in a way that's just, counterproductive and basically barbaric. And we should get past that and get on with behaving in a human and decent way to each other.
There's still around 15 detainees at Guantanamo Bay, including 6 who have never been charged at all. What steps need to be taken to ensure a just resolution for them? That's number one. And my second question is the closure of the facility truly possible? And what would it signify for global human rights advocacy?
Well, look, yeah, there are still 15 people there. There are still some people there who are no more terrorists than I am. And that just goes to show that this whole thing has been a total farce. I was there at the beginning. I brought the very first case. I'll be there at the end, unless I pass on before they close the place. So we still have work to do. Now, right now, there's the case of, for example, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and other people who are accused of actually being involved in 9/11. And that's another example of this total injustice. In Guantanamo, we've created a military commission process that we created out of whole cloth on April the 30th, 2003. And it's nonsense. And since then, in all the years this has been going on, now over 20 years, they haven't managed to have one proper trial that convicted anybody. So it's a total farce. And we'd worked out a deal where the various people in 9/11 would plead and would avoid the death penalty, which is sensible for everyone, for the victims of 9/11 and for everyone else. But obviously, there are these sort of ridiculous people in the administration who think we should just carry on torturing everyone in Guantanamo. So, this is going to be with us for a long time unless people wake up and close the place down. And I don't think in the next 4 years you're going to see anyone sensible in Washington waking up and closing Guantanamo.
I think we're going to leave on that note. A bit pressed for time, but thank you so much, Clive, for sharing your invaluable insights and for your tireless commitment to justice and human rights. I think the story of Guantanamo Bay is far from over, but with advocates like you, there remains hope for accountability and change. We appreciate your time today.
Thanks, Leo. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I think a very, very interesting conversation there with Clive Stafford. He brought, I think, one of the first cases, if not the first case, against Guantanamo to the U.S. Supreme Court back in 2002, a landmark case that challenged the legality of indefinite detention at the facility. And yeah, the Biden administration just this past week transferring 11 Yemeni detainees to Oman. I think these guys spent almost 20 years in detention without any kind of trial or without being charged. And this move has brought the remaining detainees count at Guantanamo Bay to just 15. And this is the lowest since the prison's inception back in 2002. So it will be interesting to see if ultimately we'll get to a point where we see the complete closure of Guantanamo Bay and the trauma and the horrors that it had coming with it or existed with it. And yeah, with that being said, we've come to the end of today's edition of News and Views. Inaid Wadi will be with you again tomorrow morning. But we don't leave you just like that. We leave you with our hashtag Heard on Air feature, which it was an interesting conversation held yesterday by Inaid Wadi on his Wednesday nights with Inaid, where the focus was on Israel's blatant disregard for health rights in Gaza. And he had really, really interesting guests. He had Dr. Masolia Theron. He's the South African Healthcare Workers for Palestine Representatives, and also spoke to Dr. Salia Hassan. He's a British physician, presenter, journalist, and she has worked as a humanitarian doctor in conflict zones, including Gaza before, and also spoke to Nick Maynard, a surgeon at Oxford University. So take a listen to that conversation. But from myself, Salailo, and the rest of the team, it's adios. Shap, shap.